This is English 201, Week 4, Part 9. And I'm on the top of page 9 of the story. Okay. Although Gregor wasn't able to hear any news directly, he did listen to much of what was said in the next room, and whenever he heard anyone speaking, he would scurry straight to the appropriate door and press his whole body against it. There was seldom any conversation, especially at first, that was not about him in some way, even if only in secret. For 2 whole days, all the talk at every mealtime was about what they should do now. But even between meals, they spoke about the same subject as there were always at least 2 members of the family at home. Nobody wanted to be home by themselves, and it was out of the question to leave the apartment, entirely empty. And on the very first day, the maid had fallen to her knees and begged Gregor's mother to let her go without delay. It was not very clear how much she knew of what had happened, but she left within a quarter of an hour, tearfully thanking Gregor's mother for her dismissal as if she had done her an enormous service. She even swore emphatically not to tell anyone the slightest about what had happened, even though no one had asked that of her. Now, Gregor's sister also had to help his mother with the cooking, although there was not much bother as no one ate very much. Gregor often heard how one of them would unsuccessfully urge another to eat and receive no more answer than "no thanks, I've had enough," or something similar. No one drank very much either. His sister would sometimes ask his father whether he would like a beer, hoping for the chance to go and fetch it herself. When his father said nothing, she would add, so that he would not feel selfish, that she could send the housekeeper for it. But even then, his father would close the matter with a big loud no, and no more would be said. Even before the first day had come to an end, his father had explained to Gregor's mother and sister what their finances and prospects were. Now and then he stood up from the table and took some receipt or document from the little cash box he had saved from his business when it had collapsed 5 years earlier. Gregor heard how he opened the complicated lock and then closed it again after he had taken the item he wanted. What he heard his father say was some of the first good news that Gregor had heard since he had first been incarcerated in his room. He had thought that nothing at all remained from his father's business. At least he had never told him anything different, and Gregor had never asked him about it anyway. Their business misfortune had reduced the family to a state of total despair, and Gregor's only concern at the time had been to arrange things so that they could all forget about it as quickly as possible. So then he started working especially hard, with a fiery vigor that raised him from a junior salesman to a traveling representative almost overnight, bringing with it the chance to earn money in quite different ways. Gregor converted his success at work straight into cash that he could lay on the table at home for the benefit of his astonished and delighted family. They had been good times, and they had never come again, at least not with the same splendor, although Gregor had later earned so much that he thought he was in a position to bear the costs of the whole family, and did bear them. They had even got used to it, both Gregor and the family. They took the money with gratitude, and he was glad to provide it, although there was no longer much warm affection given in return. Gregor only remained close to his sister now. Unlike him, she was very fond of music and a gifted and expressive violinist. It was his secret plan to send her to the conservatory next year, even though he thought it would cause great expense that would have to be made up for in some other way. Conservatory is like music school. During Gregor's short periods in town, conversation with his sister would often turn to the conservatory, but it was only ever mentioned as a lovely dream that would never be realized. Their parents did not like to hear this innocent talk. But Gregor thought about it quite hard and decided he would let them know what he planned with a grand announcement of it on Christmas Day. That was the sort of pointless thing that went through his mind in his present state, pressed upright against the door and listening. There were times when he simply became too tired to continue listening, when his head would fall wearily against the door, and he would put it up again with a start, as even the slightest noise he caused would be heard next door, and they would all go silent. "What's he doing now?" his father would say after a while, clearly having gone over to the door, and only then would the interrupted conversation slowly be taken up again. When explaining things, his father repeated himself several times, partly because it was a long time since he had been occupied with these matters himself, and partly because Gregor's mother did not understand everything the first time. From these repeated explanations, Gregor learned, to his pleasure, that despite all their misfortunes, there was still some money available from the old days. It was not a lot, but it had not been touched in the meantime, and some interest had accumulated. Besides that, they had not been using up all the money Gregor had been bringing home every month, keeping only a little for himself, so that too had been accumulating. Behind the door, Gregor nodded with enthusiasm and pleasure at this unexpected thrift and caution. He could actually have used the surplus money to reduce his father's debt to his boss, and the day when he could have freed himself from that job would have come much closer, but now it was certainly better the way his father had done things. The money, however, was certainly not enough to enable the whole family to live off the interest. It was enough to maintain them for perhaps 1 or 2 years, no more. That's to say, it was money that should not really be touched but set aside for emergencies. Money to live on had to be earned. His father was healthy but old and lacking in self confidence. During the 5 years he had not been working, the first holiday in a life that had been full of strain and no success, he had put on a lot of weight and become very slow and clumsy. Would Gregor's elderly mother now have to go and earn money? She suffered from asthma, and it was a strain for her just to move about the home. Every other day would be spent struggling for breath on the sofa by the open window. Would his sister have to go and earn money? Well, she was still a child of 17. Her life up until then had been very enviable, consisting of wearing nice clothes, sleeping late, helping out with the business, joining in with a few modest pleasures, and most of all, playing the violin. Whenever they began to talk of the need to earn money, Gregor would always first let go of the door and then throw himself onto the cool leather sofa next to it, as he became quite hot with shame and regret. He would often lie there the whole night through, not sleeping a wink, but scratching at the leather for hours on end. Or he might go to the effort of pushing a chair up to the window, climbing up onto the sill, and propped up in the chair, leaning on the window to stare out of it. He had he had used to feel a great sense of freedom from doing this, but doing it now was obviously something more remembered than experienced, as what he actually saw in this way was becoming less distinct every day, even things that were quite near. He had used to curse his ever present view of the hospital across the street, but now he could not see it at all. And if he had not known that he lived in Charlottenstrasse, which was a quiet street despite being in the middle of the city, he could have thought that he was looking out a window at a barren waste where the gray sky and earth mingled inseparably. His observant sister only needed to notice the chair twice before she would always push it back into its exact position by the window, as if she had tidied up after she tidied up the room, and even left the inner pane of the window open from then on. If Gregor had only been able to speak to his sister and thank her for all that she had done for him, it would have been easier for him to bear it. But as it caused him pain. But as it was, it caused him pain. His sister naturally tried as far as possible to pretend there was nothing burdensome about it, and the longer it went on, of course, the better she was able to do so. But as time went by, Gregor was able to see through it all so much better. It had even become very unpleasant for him now whenever she entered the room. No sooner had she come in than she would quickly close the door as a precaution so that no one would have to suffer the view of Gregor's room. Then she would go straight to the window and pull it hurriedly open, almost as if she were suffocating. All right, no lie, I lost my space. No, I got it. Wait. Yeah. Even if it was cold, she would stay at the window breathing deeply for a while. She would alarm Gregor twice a day with this running about and noise-making. He would stay under the couch, shivering the whole while, knowing full well that she would certainly have liked to spare him this ordeal, but it was impossible for her to be in the same room with him with the windows closed. One day, about a month after Gregor's transformation, when his sister no longer had any particular reason to be shocked at his appearance, she came into the room a little earlier than usual and found him still staring out of the window, motionless, and just where he would be most horrible. In itself, his sister's not coming into the room would have been no surprise for Gregor, as it would have been difficult for her to immediately open the window while he was still there. But not only did she not come in, she went straight back out and closed the door behind her. A stranger would have thought he had threatened her and tried to bite her. Gregor went straight to hide himself under the couch, of course, but he had to wait until midday before his sister came back, and she seemed much more uneasy than usual. It made him realize that she still found his appearance unbearable, and would continue to do so. She probably even had to overcome the urge to flee when she saw the little bit of him that protruded under the couch. One day, in order to spare her even this sight, he spent 4 hours carrying the bedsheet over to the couch on his back and arranged it so he was completely covered, and his sister would not be able to see him even if she bent down. If she did not think this sheet was necessary, then all she had to do was take it off again, as it was clear enough that it was no pleasure for Gregor to cut himself off so completely. She left the sheet where it was. Gregor even thought he glimpsed a look of gratitude one time when he carefully looked out from under the sheet to see how his sister liked the new arrangement. All right, I'll read a little bit more in the next video, and then we're done for the day.